The front door was unlocked. That was my first cue something was wrong. Danielle, my wife, locked it by muscle memory. Morning or night, rain or shine, whether I was home or gone, she'd do it twice sometimes, deadbolt and chain. But tonight, when I turned the handle, it gave instantly, quiet, effortless, like the lock had been waiting for me to walk through. I stepped inside. No TV, no footsteps, just low music coming faintly from the back of the house. I looked down at the bag in my hand, my father's prescriptions, still fresh from the 24-hour pharmacy. I told her I'd be out all night, that Dad's breathing had worsened and I needed to stay at the assisted care center. That was true, until it wasn't. His vitals had stabilized. I could have stayed. I didn't. And now I was here, unannounced, 38 minutes early. The hallway light was on. It spilled across the living room floor in a narrow beam that ended just before my feet. The rest of the house was dark. Still, I heard her laugh first. Software, not performative, familiar. Then came his voice. Logan, my younger brother. You worry too much. He's not coming home tonight. I know, Danielle said, but we shouldn't. A pause, a creak, fabric rustling. Then her voice again, low and breathless. He's not paying attention. He hasn't been for months. I walked down the hall with controlled steps. The guest room door was half shut. From where I stood, I could see only shadows, a hand sliding across skin, a leg shifting over sheets. Her foot brushed the floor, red toenail polish, chipped. Logan, my younger brother, wasn't supposed to be here. He didn't live here. He didn't even have a key. And Danielle, my wife of 8 years, wasn't supposed to be in that bed with him. I stood in silence for 17 seconds, counted each one. Then I turned around and walked out of the hallway. No sound, no confrontation, no emotion. I sat at the kitchen table and placed the pharmacy bag down in front of me. The refrigerator kicked on. The clock above the sink ticked in slow, steady rhythm. The bottle of Merlot on the counter was open, half empty. 2 glasses sat beside it, one with her lipstick, the other clear. I didn't pour a drink. I didn't go upstairs. I just sat. My name is Carson Hale. I'm 37 years old, mechanical contractor, firstborn son, primary caregiver. For the past 11 months, my life has been divided between hospital corridors, insurance calls, and late-night care rotations for my father, who's been dying of Parkinson's inch by inch. Danielle said she'd manage the house. She didn't mention she'd be doing it with my brother. Logan was never the dependable one. He skipped holidays, missed our mother's funeral, moved jobs every year, relationships every 6 months. But when Dad got worse, he suddenly showed up, said he wanted to help. He brought groceries, cooked a few times, acted concerned. I wanted to believe him. Danielle did. They started talking more, texting more, laughing in corners when they thought I wasn't listening. And then I stopped listening. I started watching. That night, after they fell asleep, presumably in my guest room, I walked into my father's study and opened his locked drawer. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but I found something anyway. A folder, labeled in Danielle's handwriting, property management notes. Inside, printed emails, county forms, a scanned copy of our property deed, and a typed letter. The addressee line said, "To whom it may concern, re. Hale Residence Transfer." At the bottom, where my father's name was signed, the pen stroke trembled. But not in the way his hand actually trembles. This wasn't just infidelity. This was paperwork. The next morning, Danielle came into the kitchen in one of my old t-shirts. She kissed my cheek. She asked if I'd slept at the clinic. I said yes. She made coffee. Told me Logan had stopped by last night to drop something off. I nodded. She asked if I was okay. Just tired, I replied. She touched my shoulder and gave me a soft look. We're all stretched thin. You've been doing so much. I stared at her hand, then at her face, then back at the coffee, now cold in my cup. Later that day, I reviewed the security footage. I'd installed a hallway camera after a break-in 2 years ago. I'd nearly forgotten it existed. Timestamp 9:17 p.m. Logan entered using the spare key from the planter. Danielle, my wife, was already waiting by the door. They didn't speak for several seconds. Then they kissed. It was not the first time. I saved the footage to 3 encrypted drives. One local, one cloud, one offsite. I didn't label them evidence. Not yet. That night, I installed a new camera, discreet, near the guest room vent. Then a second in my father's study. Voice activated, motion triggered. Let them talk, let them plan, let them forget I was watching. Danielle brought up the idea of consolidating Dad's estate over dinner the next day. Logan mentioned how this house is a lot for one person. I listened, and I smiled, because they weren't just sneaking around. They were positioning themselves. Romance was a distraction. Theft was the goal. They wanted the house, the land, the legacy. And they thought I was too buried in grief to notice. But I wasn't grieving. I was preparing. Let them think they were winning. Let them believe I was numb. Because when you come for a man's family home, you better make sure he's not paying attention. I was. And I'd never forget what I saw behind that door. They didn't say it to my face. Not at first. It started in fragments, slipped into conversation like background noise. Danielle mentioned feeling alone in this house. Logan said I seemed more like a caretaker than a husband lately. Phrases like that. Weighted but casual, coated in empathy. Just concerned voices, wondering aloud if I'd stretched myself too thin. I let them talk. That was the only way to hear what they really thought. Danielle made dinner one night, something simple. Pasta, wine, jazz humming in the background, like we were pretending to be a real couple. She sat across from me and said, "Do you remember the last time we went anywhere together?" I didn't answer. She waited, then smiled, like she was being gentle. "We've both changed, haven't we?" I stared at the base of my glass. "Some things don't change." She nodded slowly, like she wanted that to sound profound. Like we were two people acknowledging something sad and noble. It wasn't noble. It was preparation. I'd heard similar words 2 days earlier, from Logan. He stopped by to drop off a box of LED bulbs. Claimed he found them on sale. Said Danielle had mentioned the lighting was too harsh in the hallway. He stayed longer than necessary. Walked through the house like he'd lived there before. Paused at the back porch and said, "This place needs updates. Might be good to get ahead of that before, you know." I didn't ask what before meant. He added, "She's been holding it all together. You're out of the picture most of the time." Then he looked at me, full of fake sympathy. "No judgment. I know you're doing what you can." That was the moment I knew they were telling the same story, to themselves, to each other, maybe even to the people around us. A story where I was absent, unavailable. Someone who had slowly stepped out of his own life, giving them permission to fill the space. That night, Danielle brought me a cup of tea. She said, "You've been so quiet lately." "I'm listening," I said. "To what?" "Everything." She laughed, thought I was being philosophical. She kissed the top of my head and said, "You're a good man, Carson." I didn't respond. That same night, I added a second recorder. This one in the study, where they often whispered when they thought I was asleep. I'd already tested the audio range. I didn't need perfect sound. I just needed truth. 3 days later, I got it. Logan's voice came through, hushed but clear. "If we do it before the will reading, it won't matter. He won't contest anything. He won't even see it coming." Danielle answered, "He's exhausted. He's got tunnel vision. We're practically doing him a favor." They both laughed. I let the file run to the end before saving it. The next morning, I made them both coffee. Logan had stayed over, claiming it was late and he'd had too much wine. Danielle acted like it was normal, like this was just part of life now. An open-door policy for betrayal. She asked what I was working on that day. I said, "Just errands. Maybe some paperwork." She smiled. "You're always buried in something. Some things are worth doing carefully." She didn't answer. That afternoon, I checked the browser history on the family desktop. She'd cleared it, as expected. What she hadn't realized was that the system synced across all devices. I didn't even need the cache. I found 3 downloaded PDFs, a property transfer application, a notary verification checklist, and a sample letter of intent for succession planning. None of them had my name on them. I didn't confront her. I backed up the files, encrypted them, and emailed them to myself from a dummy address I'd created 6 months ago when I first noticed how often Logan appeared uninvited. Danielle began talking about renovations. "The porch could use sealing. The windows, especially in Dad's old room, they're starting to rot." I said, "Interesting that you call it Dad's room." She blinked, then covered. "I just meant that side of the house." I nodded. "You've been thinking a lot about this house." She tilted her head. "Well, haven't you?" "I've been thinking about everything." Logan showed up again that night, this time with paint swatches. "I figured, you know, if this becomes our base of operations, it should feel more modern." "Our base of operations?" I asked, "What exactly are you planning to operate?" He smiled. "Relax, man. Just thinking ahead." Danielle set the table in silence. They were past the phase of pretending now. What they didn't realize was I'd been past the phase of forgiveness. They weren't just betraying me. They were writing me out of my own family's story. I spent that evening in the basement, not hiding, cataloging, sorting files, backing up the audio, organizing dates, aligning statements. Every sentence Danielle whispered in the hallway, every threat Logan made about legal timing, every "he won't even notice and just get it done" was time-stamped, sorted, and stored. They were busy justifying what they were doing. I was preparing to end it. They said I was too busy to love her. They said I had stepped away. They had no idea how much attention I'd been paying. It was raining that morning. Not heavily, just enough to make the house feel quiet. Heavy air, ticking gutters, the occasional patter against the windows. Danielle was upstairs. Logan had left an hour earlier, claiming he had a meeting. I waited until the sound of her footsteps faded to the shower before unlocking the study. It wasn't locked for security, just discretion. My father's desk was in the corner. Oak, worn smooth by decades of receipts, blueprints, tax filings, and careful letters he never sent. I had spent most of my childhood sneaking pieces of candy from his top drawer. Now I was looking for evidence. I didn't expect to find it so fast. The third drawer down stuck, just slightly. Inside, beneath a folder labeled Utilities, I found a manila envelope, untitled, unfolded. The edge of it was worn, like someone had handled it too often. Inside, 7 sheets. 3 were printed from a property transfer form, the kind you find on the county recorder's website. 1 was filled in. The remaining 3 were drafts, each marked up in Danielle's handwriting. I recognized her lowercase g. She looped it backwards, always had. The completed form was dated 2 weeks ago. My father's name was typed at the top, printed under current property owner. Logan's name was listed beneath under successor owner, and beside that, Danielle's name, not as a witness, as a co-signer. No mention of me. There was a signature at the bottom. It was shaky, uneven, supposedly my father's. But I'd seen what my father's signature looked like recently. This one was too clean, too consistent in its loops, an imitation of tremor, not the real thing. Whoever wrote it tried to make it look degraded, but real degradation doesn't happen on command. It stutters, it bleeds. This was scripted. There was a second document, a typed statement, 1 paragraph. To whom it may concern. I, Richard Hale, transfer Hale residence rights to Logan Hale and Danielle Hale for purposes of long-term property management and stability during illness. Carson has been made aware of this and has expressed no objection. I read it again. Carson has been made aware. I hadn't. I folded the paper slowly, placed it back in the envelope, and slid under my arm. I didn't take everything. Just enough. Danielle was in the kitchen when I walked back through. She was drying a plate, humming. She looked up. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I said. Something on your mind? Always. She smiled. You think too much. Better than thinking too late. She paused for a second, then turned back to the dishes. I left before she could ask more questions. At the care center, I asked my father's attending nurse a simple question. Can I get a certified statement of his motor control capacity for the last month? She didn't ask why. I got the document that afternoon. It confirmed what I already knew. On the day the signature was dated, my father had been sedated for respiratory distress and hadn't gripped a pen all day. She included a scan of the nursing chart. Weak grip, declined strength, under observation. The signature was impossible. That night, I placed the envelope in a separate lockbox, not the one in my closet, one I had bolted beneath the floorboards of the workshop. Danielle didn't know it existed. I didn't ask questions at dinner, didn't bring up the deed, didn't accuse. She asked if I was tired. I said yes. She reached across the table and touched my wrist. Her hand lingered. I didn't move. Logan called while we were cleaning up. She answered, speaking softly. I stood in the hallway and listened as she whispered, No, not yet. It'll be soon. Not yet, but soon. They were timing it. I reviewed the county clerk's schedule online. The office was closed on holidays, meaning they had to file the forged deed before the reading of the will, scheduled for the week after next. They thought I was standing in the way. I was already moving past them. I contacted an attorney that night, quietly, a specialist in estate fraud. I didn't give my full name, just asked what proof I'd need if someone attempted to illegally transfer ownership of an incapacitated person's assets. She gave me a checklist. By morning, I had 4 out of 5 items already in hand. They had forged signatures. I had timelines, medical verification, a motive, and a witness who had no idea she'd become one. I didn't need more. I just needed to let them finish what they'd started. Because there's nothing more effective than letting someone believe they've already won. Let them file it. Let them say it out loud. Let them walk into the room where the will is read with rehearsed smiles and a practice story about my absence. I would be waiting there, not with anger, with facts. They had no idea they were speaking on record. That was the advantage. Danielle had always been careful with paper. Passwords, deletion history, backdated drafts. But she wasn't careful with her voice. And Logan never imagined he'd need to be. He was used to getting by on charisma, not caution. That made them dangerous together, confident in each other, dismissive of everyone else, especially me. The camera I installed behind the guest room vent was small, motion activated, no blinking lights, no hum. I chose the model for its silence. I'd mounted it 2 weeks prior when I first suspected the affair. But what I captured wasn't intimacy, it was planning. They used the guest room as a war room. At night, after they assumed I was asleep, they talked freely there. I didn't monitor it live. That would have made me angry, and anger wasn't useful. I reviewed it in the mornings, methodically, with a notepad beside me. One clip started with Logan pacing. "She said the reading's the 17th, he told her. "That gives us 10 days. "Then we file this week," Danielle said. "What if he notices?" "He won't. He's barely here." I paused the video and stared at her face. The arrogance, the calm. I pressed play. "We say it was Dad's decision," Logan said. "If he fights it, he looks like the ungrateful son." Danielle nodded. "We're not stealing it. We're protecting it from him." I clicked save. The file name didn't matter. I'd already memorized the timestamp. 1:13 a.m., 6 days before they planned to go to the clerk's office. There were more clips. Logan printing a fake letter. Danielle adjusting language on the transfer form. Her words again. "He won't fight. He doesn't have the energy." She was right about one thing. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to document. I moved the footage into a secure drive and uploaded a backup to a private server I'd created years ago for job site blueprints. Then I went upstairs, made coffee, and acted like nothing had happened. Logan showed up that morning. They were in the garden together when I stepped outside. She was kneeling in the soil, pulling weeds she never touched before. He stood beside her with his hands in his pockets, watching her like he'd already won something. Danielle saw me and smiled. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I replied. Logan gave a casual nod. "Morning." Neither of them looked nervous. Why would they? They thought the game was still hidden. Inside the house, I printed out still frames. Images of both of them reviewing documents in my father's study. Screenshots of timestamps. Her hand on the notary checklist. His voice reading line items from the asset transfer sheet. I laid the printout on the table, labeled each one. Then I gathered them into a folder and slipped it inside the case I'd bring to the reading. The audio files were even worse. "One night," she said. "After it's done, we'll need to repaint." "I want this place to feel new," Logan responded. "We can fix the upstairs, maybe turn the study into an office." The study. My father's study. The place where he used to write letters to my mother's grave every year on her birthday. Where he kept the wedding ring she wore when she died. where he hid every hand-drawn birthday card we ever gave him. And now they were dividing it like a prize. I closed the laptop and sat still for a long time. That was the only moment I felt anything close to grief. Not for Danielle, not for Logan, for the home, for what it had become. That night, Danielle asked me if I'd eaten. I told her I wasn't hungry. She said I looked pale, asked if I needed rest. "I'm fine," I said. "You've been so distant lately." "I've been here the whole time." She tilted her head. "You know what I mean." "No," I said. "I really don't." She reached for my hand. I let her, not because I needed comfort, because she did. The next morning, she drove to the notary's office. I tracked the appointment. She texted Logan at 10:17 a.m. "All done. Clerk signs off Friday." They'd timed it carefully. What they didn't realize was that the clerk they used, R. McAllister, was also on the advisory board for the local construction union. I'd done work for her father's house 2 years ago. I called her that afternoon, told her what I suspected. I didn't ask for intervention, just confirmation. She said, "The signature doesn't look right, but it's not our call unless someone contests it." "I will," I said, "at the reading. Then bring everything." "I will." She paused. "Do they know you know?" "No." "Then keep it that way." I hung up and locked the folder, added the clerk's email, added a short affidavit from my father's nurse, added a clip of Danielle saying, "He doesn't even check the printer history." They were careless. They thought secrecy was about hiding, but real secrecy is about who notices. And I had noticed everything. Let them finish the job. Let them come to the reading ready to claim their prize. Let them smile at the lawyer. Let them feign surprise when they're asked if they've seen any documents recently filed. Because when the screen plays the video, when the voices echo in that room, they'll know exactly how much I was paying attention. They arrived early. Danielle wore navy, conservative, minimal jewelry. She looked like someone who understood the weight of loss, but not too personally. The right mix of reverence and distance. Logan followed behind her. Dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, hands in his pockets, like he was trying to play grief casual, as if he'd just wandered into the role of responsible son. They didn't expect me to already be there. I was seated in the far corner of the lawyer's conference room. Neutral walls, polished wood table, nothing sentimental, just order, documents, legality. Exactly what I needed. Danielle gave me a small smile when she saw me. Logan gave a nod. They didn't ask why I was early. They assumed guilt would arrive late. The estate attorney, Mr. Groves, entered 10 minutes later with 2 assistants and a stack of documents. He was efficient, 71 years old, retired twice, still sharp. He greeted each of us politely, then sat at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming," he said. "This will be straightforward. The will was updated 6 months ago. Your father was of sound mind, and his signature was properly witnessed." Danielle placed her hand gently on the edge of Logan's chair. Logan leaned back slightly. Practiced ease. I didn't move. Groves continued. "We'll begin with asset allocations. If there are no objections, we'll proceed quickly." Danielle raised a hand delicately. "If I may, I just want to say something before we start." Groves gestured for her to continue. "I know this process is difficult," she began. "But Logan and I have done our best to support Richard in his final months. Carson, of course, was involved with the medical side of things, and we respect that. But daily care, home management, it takes a toll. We've tried to honor Richard's wishes by handling those responsibilities. It was almost convincing. Her tone was light, respectful. She didn't accuse. She framed. Logan followed. Dad and I had a lot of conversations near the end. He made it clear that he didn't want to burden anyone. He said he wanted the house to be taken care of by someone who would live in it. Someone who understood what it meant. He looked at me while he said it. I didn't respond. Groves raised an eyebrow. Are you saying there was a verbal directive that differs from the written will? Danielle smiled faintly. Not at all. Just context. I think Richard would have wanted everything to go smoothly. With understanding. Groves glanced down at the folder in front of him. Well, the will is clear. We'll go through it now. They nodded, hands folded. He began reading. My father had left his personal savings to be divided equally. The lake cabin to a cousin in Vermont. The car to Logan, specific but minor. Then he came to the house. The Hale residence, located at 12 Granger Lane, is to remain in the name of Carson Hale. Full transfer of ownership and property title shall take effect within 30 days of my passing. Danielle didn't move. Logan blinked once. Groves looked up. This is notarized, witnessed, and time-stamped. There was silence. Logan cleared his throat. We were told the property was already being transferred. Danielle had paperwork, filed with the clerk. Groves frowned. I wasn't made aware of that. What paperwork? Danielle reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. It was a standard transfer request. Based on Richard's deteriorating condition, we believed it was best to secure the property under more active management. We acted in good faith. I leaned forward. That's interesting, I said, because on the day he supposedly signed those documents, my father was sedated and under full nursing supervision for a respiratory event. He couldn't hold a pen. I have a statement from the attending nurse to that effect. Danielle's eyes flicked to me. I turned to Groves. I also have video. Multiple instances of Logan and Danielle discussing the forged documents, discussing timing, discussing filing behind my back, discussing how to make it appear legitimate. Groves looked from me to them. Logan's face changed first. The casual confidence gone. Danielle said nothing. I've uploaded all relevant footage and supporting documents to a secure cloud server, I continued. You'll find motion-triggered clips from the guest room, audio from the study, and print logs matching Danielle's edits on the transfer application. Groves sat back in his chair. Slowly. Is this true? He asked Danielle. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Then, quietly, we thought it was what Richard wanted. Groves shook his head. Intent isn't ownership. Forged signatures and preemptive filings are not only illegal, they void any claim to legitimacy. I'll be advising the county clerk's office of this immediately. Logan stood. This is ridiculous. No, I said. What's ridiculous is stealing a home from someone while they're keeping your father alive. He looked like he wanted to speak again, but didn't. Groves slid the original will across the table to me. I'll be finalizing the title transfer this week. Carson, you'll receive confirmation shortly. I nodded, folded the folder, stood up. Danielle said my name softly as I turned. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Let them sit in that room and feel the walls close in. Let them wonder how long I'd known, how deep it went. They came to claim the house. Instead, they watched it slip away. On paper, in real time, legally and irreversibly. Groves called it a formality. He said we could submit the video quietly, Let the authorities process it on their timeline, file the fraud claims, attach the time-stamped audio, and let it die in paperwork. I disagreed. There's a difference between justice and silence, between being cleared and being heard. Danielle didn't speak to me for 2 days after the will reading. She walked past me like I wasn't in the house, made coffee for herself, slept in the guest room, avoided eye contact like it might set off a landmine. Logan called once, I let it ring, then I let it ring again and again. He stopped calling after the 4th time. That Saturday, I invited Groves and a small panel from the local clerk's office to the house. I didn't use terms like meeting or hearing. I just said, I have something you'll want to see. They arrived at 3 p.m. Sharp, professional, measured. One woman brought a legal pad, another had a tablet. I had everything queued up. Living room, neutral lighting, TV muted, laptop connected to the screen. Danielle walked in just before I started the playback. She froze when she saw the guests. Groves gestured to the couch. Please sit. She didn't move. I clicked the first file. It opened on Logan's voice. File the form by Thursday. If we wait, it overlaps with the will. Then Danielle. We'll say it was Dad's idea. No one can prove otherwise. The room went still. Then another clip. Danielle speaking softly. He won't notice. He's too tired. He signs anything. Laughter followed. Not mine. I turned to the panel. I have a full medical statement from the attending nurse. My father was sedated. His grip strength was clinically marked as non-functional for writing. There's no way he signed anything. They nodded. Wrote that down. I opened the next clip. Logan again. If he gets in the way, we say he's unstable. People already think he's burned out. He's been quiet for months. Danielle. Exactly. We tell them he's not managing things well. We're just stepping in. The last clip was 10 seconds. Danielle's voice, crystal clear. This house will be ours before he even sees it coming. Silence followed. Not from the room. From her. Groves stood slowly. I'll be submitting these to the county fraud office this afternoon. The woman with the tablet asked, Have you filed charges yet? Not yet, I said. I wanted you to hear it first. Danielle finally spoke. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Groves turned to her. You forged legal property documents and attempted to reassign ownership of a family estate using a fabricated signature. I didn't forge it. Then who did? She looked down. Her hands were clenched tightly together. Logan handled that part. Interesting, I said, because he told you in the second recording to bring him the final version after you sign it. You said, already done. It looks just like the real thing. Danielle didn't reply. The panel began collecting their things. Polite, efficient. Groves walked over to me, quietly handed me a sealed envelope. Full title confirmation, he said. Filed and certified. I nodded. Do you want me to stay when you speak to her? No, I said. We're done speaking. He left. So did they. Danielle sat on the edge of the couch, hands pressed to her temples. I was desperate, she said finally. Number U was certain. She looked at me, eyes rimmed red. I thought you didn't care anymore. I stared at her. You thought I didn't notice. You gambled on distraction. That's not the same thing. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. I'll be gone by morning, she said. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to explain. Let her pack in silence. Let her carry the weight of the evidence in her own memory. Let her sit in a car beside Logan and replay every second they thought they were alone. because I hadn't yelled. I hadn't broken anything. I hadn't even raised my voice. All I'd done was press record and let their own words unravel them. Danielle left before sunrise. She didn't knock on my door, didn't leave a note. I only knew she was gone when I heard the click of the front door and looked out the window to see her car roll down the gravel without headlights. The house felt heavier in the silence she left behind. Logan didn't show up again. Not to explain, not to fight, not even to grab the things he'd conveniently left over the past month. His hoodie on the coat rack, a book on the end table, an old gym bag he never used. They stayed where he left them, like residue. I left them there for a week. Then I burned the hoodie in the fire pit and donated the rest. There were no apologies, no texts, no justifications, not from either of them. Because when you get caught in your own words, there's nothing left to negotiate. I sat down with Groves 2 days later and signed the final confirmation papers. The house was mine, officially, legally, without question. The will had held, the county had filed, the footage had done its work, and their names on every piece of forged paperwork were now tied to a formal investigation. Groves offered to press charges. I declined. Let them sit with the consequences, I said. You're sure? Yes. They'd taken their shot, and they'd missed. Publicly. Permanently. Let the record show what kind of people they really were. Let the silence that followed define them better than any courtroom ever could. After the dust settled, I walked through every room of the house alone. Not to reclaim it. To listen. To the floorboard in the upstairs hallway that creaked half a beat late. To the porch step my father refused to fix because it gave the house character. To the drawer in the study that always stuck unless you pulled it just right. This place didn't belong to them. It never did. And now it never would. I packed up the last of my father's files in the study. Everything else, his cufflinks, his old slippers, the watch he wore on the day I was born, I left exactly where it was, because this house wasn't meant to be remodeled. It was meant to remain. I repainted one room, not the kitchen, not the guest room. The room Danielle never entered, my father's during his final days. I stripped the walls to the plaster, filled every hole, smoothed every crack. Then I painted it white, clean, quiet, fresh. I set up a chair by the window, placed his books on the shelf, and left the door open. Not as a shrine, as a reminder. The house was quiet for weeks after that. Neighbors asked about Danielle. I told them nothing. They pieced it together quickly. Small towns do that. Word spreads without effort, especially when the betrayal is that loud and the fall that fast. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't defend her. I didn't need to. Let them carry the weight of what they'd done, without me explaining it. She had gambled on control. Logan had gambled on legacy. They lost both. And I never raised my voice. I never wrote a confrontation letter. I never threw a punch. All I did was notice, record, file, wait. That's the thing about revenge. When it's done right, no one has to see you win. They just have to realize they've already lost. Weeks turned into months. One afternoon in early spring, I walked past the study and noticed something out of place. A photo had shifted on the shelf. I picked it up. It was from my 8th birthday. Dad, Logan, and me on the porch, holding melted ice cream cones. 3 smiles, 2 of them real. I put it back face down. Not out of anger, out of clarity. Not every part of the past deserves to face forward. Later that evening, I sat on the porch. The air was still. The garden, half dead from winter, had started to come back on its own, not because someone cared for it, Because roots, once they take hold, remember what they're supposed to do. The house was the same, not perfect, not polished, but standing, and mine, not because of blood, because of proof, because of patience, because when it mattered, I didn't speak first. I let them, and I let the truth do the rest.